Hi everyone, and welcome to Create a Low Poly Moon with Cinema 4D. My name is Jonathan Lamb with Tuts Plus, and I'm a game artist working in London. This is a course for artists and designers who are completely new to 3D and are ready to learn the foundational skills that this program provides. Topics we'll cover will include basic modeling techniques, creating materials, and rendering. By the end of the course, you'll have a better understanding of these tools and how they work together with some of our other Cinema 4D courses. So sign in or sign up and let's get started. Hi everyone, and welcome back to Creating a Low Poly Moon with Cinema 4D. In this lesson, we'll be going through our initial setup and familiarize ourselves with the tools we'll be using throughout the course. Now, if you're familiar with using Cinema 4D already, simply skip to the next video to get started on modeling the low poly moon. So we'll get started by loading up Cinema 4D's default layout. Now to do this, you need to go to Windows, Customization, Layouts, and Startup. Now you'll also find that there are some other layout options here that you can have a look at and switch to, such as animation, modeling, and sculpting. Now if you're interested in learning more on what those options are about, check out our animation course, Create Turntable Animations in Cinema 4D. But for this course, we'll mainly be sticking with the default layout, as this will give us the necessary tools to complete our low poly moon. So the bulk of our screen space will be taken up by the viewport, which is what we'll be spending most of our time looking at, modeling our objects and also testing how our final render will look like later on. At the top here, we have our top menu bar. And this is where we'll select our main buttons, such as the Live Selection tool, the Move tool, the Scale tool, and the Rotation tool. In the middle here, we have our rendering options. And over to the right here, we have our creation options. Cool. So now that we've familiarized ourselves with the bulk of our screen, to the right of our screen here, this is where our objects will be listed. So this includes all the 3D shapes that we'll be creating for our scene. So for example, if I was to spawn a cube here, you can see how the cube automatically goes in our list of objects. And it's the same if I was to create a sphere. This will also be in our list of objects here as well. Cool. This is very useful for when we want to select different objects when we can't easily select them in our viewport. So as you can see here, our sphere is inside our cube. It's very difficult to select it. But if we selected the sphere here, all we have to do is use the Move tool to move it out of the cube. Excellent. So let's go ahead and delete those objects. Now below this list here, we have our adjustments window. And this is where we can edit our objects, which I will show you how to do throughout the rest of the course. And finally, to the left of the screen, we have some modeling options. So we have things like the Points tool, the Edges tool, and the Polygons tool, which is what we'll be using mainly when creating our low poly moon. Also at the bottom here is where we have our materials section, so we can create materials here. And we also have the position section here. So this is where we can adjust the positions of our objects and also the rotation of our object here as well. So to navigate the viewport, simply hold the Alt key. So it's probably easier if I spawn a cube here. So hold the Alt key on the keyboard and then just click and drag using the mouse to move around the object. And you can also hold the Alt key and click and drag the middle button to move sideways, like so. Now, by using the mouse wheel, we can zoom in and we can zoom out. And we can also use these buttons at the top here. So if we click and hold this button here, we can pan across our object. If we click and hold this button here, we can zoom in and out. And if we click and hold this button here, we can move around our object like so. Now this button lets us view the other views in Cinema 4D. So we've got our perspective view, the top of our cube, the front of our cube, and the right of our cube. And in order to select these viewports, all we need to do is hover our mouse over it. So if we wanted to view the front, hover our mouse over it and click on the middle mouse button, like so. Cool, so feel free to practice using Cinema 4D and get used to moving around the UI. Once you're familiar with the basics of Cinema 4D, we can move on to the next lesson where we'll introduce basic shapes. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to creating a low poly moon in Cinema 4D. In this lesson, we'll be going through the different ways to create basic shapes and how we can manipulate them. This will act as the foundation for our modeling techniques. So let's begin this lesson by looking at the basic shapes. One thing you might notice are these little black arrows or triangles on the bottom right of each of these buttons. Now this means that you can click and hold onto them to bring up more options. So let's go ahead and see an example of this. So if we click and hold the cube button here, you can see that we have a good selection of shapes that we can choose from, ranging from a simple basic shape like the cube or the cone and the cylinder, to more complex shapes like the torus, landscape, and even a figure. So let's go ahead and pick the sphere, as this will act as the base model for our low poly moon. So let's click the sphere here, and this will spawn in our viewport and also in our list of objects here. Now you can rename your object by double clicking on the sphere in our list here. So let's go ahead and double click this here. And you can see now we can rename this. So let's rename this moon. And hit enter on the keyboard to accept that. And another thing that can be quite handy here are these small little dots here next to the moon in our list view. Now, clicking on the top one until it's red means that it will become invisible in our viewport. And you can see that it's no longer visible in our viewport. And this might become handy if we have lots of objects in our scene and it's kind of in the way of everything. The other thing, the one at the bottom here, clicking on this one until it's red means that it will not render, but we can still see it in the viewport unless we've got this clicked on red as well. So let's go ahead and bring those two back. All right. Now with the sphere still selected, let's draw our attention to this section of the screen here on the bottom right. Now this is where we can adjust the initial settings of our sphere. Now the main settings that we'll be interested in are in the Object tab here. And here we can adjust the radius value. So clicking on the radius value here, you can see that our sphere becomes bigger or smaller, depending on what we want to do with it. We can also increase the segments here, which will mean how many polygons the actual sphere will be made out of. Now, in order to see how this affects our sphere, let's go ahead and click on Display and click on Shading Lines here. Now you can see all the polygons on the surface of our sphere. So you can see now that if we made the segments value and had it at 100, You can see now that the resolution of our sphere becomes a lot more. So you can see we've got lots of polygons here. So let's bring it back down to 24. We can also decrease the polygons all the way up until we've got 3 segments here, and it sort of becomes like this diamond shape. But we want at least some polygons here, so let's bring it back up to the default 24. Cool. Now, for different shapes, you may find that the settings will be slightly different or may include different things. So let's go ahead and hide the moon for now. So for example, if we spawned a cube, and if we looked at the settings here, the size settings are slightly different, so we can adjust the sizes according to the axes. So the x-axis, we can make it taller using the y-axis or the z-axis here. And we can create segments according to the axes as well. So we can increase the segments in the x or the y and the z. Cool. And this will be the same for different objects as well. So if we spawn a torus, it will give us different settings. Again, we can affect the ring radius, the ring segments, the pipe radius, can make it thicker or thinner, or the pipe segments. So depending on what basic shape you choose, you can experiment with the different settings to create the exact shape that you want. Cool. So let's go ahead and delete the torus here and bring our moon back. So that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll go over how we can prepare our sphere for modeling our moon. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to create a low poly moon with Cinema 4D. In this chapter, we'll look at how we can start to model our moon. So in the last chapter, we took a look at how to create basic shapes such as the sphere here, and also we took a look at the ways that we could adjust certain parameters of our sphere and other shapes to our liking, using the adjustments window here. So for our moon, we're going to want to choose the right type of sphere to act as our base model. And to do this, we want to make sure that the sphere is selected. So either clicking in our list of objects here or clicking on the sphere in our viewport. And then just move over to the adjustments window and taking a look at the drop down box here under type. So you can see here that currently our sphere is set at standard. Now this is where we can see that the polygons become quite tight at the top and at the bottom here and get larger towards the middle of the sphere. Now we can change the way the polygons appear on the sphere by selecting another type, such as the tetrahedron here. You can see suddenly that the polygons take on a different form, a different shape to make up the sphere. And you can sort of go through each of the different types of spheres here, just seeing how the polygons look and going through all of them. Just having a look at what the different shapes are that make up the sphere, and we can even have a hemisphere here as well. But the one that we'll be looking at and the one that we'll be working on for the moon will be this one, the icosahedron. So this gives us a nice even spread of polygons around the whole sphere that we can use to model the craters and other details of our moon. So just moving around the sphere here like so, you can see that all the polygons are sort of nicely evenly spread out, unlike some of the other shapes here, some of the other spheres here. You can see it gets really tight here and really stretched in the middle here, or even the standard one where you can see it gets really tight in the top and the bottom here. So let's go ahead and click on icosahedron. And we'll also leave the segments at around 24, which is a good balance between the amount of polygons, whilst still keeping on the low side to retain that sort of low poly look. So taking a look at each of these parameters and making sure that you're happy with each and every one of them, such as the radius, making sure that you're happy with how big or small the size of your moon is. So I'm just going to go ahead and make it 140, just so that it's easier to look at in our viewport. Making sure that you're happy with the segments, which is set at 24. This is the last chance that you'll have to change them. So just playing around here until you're happy with the way that it looks. And also the type of sphere, which we know that we want to keep at icosahedron. And then from there, once we're happy with the way that our sphere looks, we need to make our object editable. Now, to edit your 3D object further, we'll need to click on this button here. So again, make sure that the object that you want to edit is selected by clicking on it here or in the viewport. And then just click on the Make Editable button, or simply hit the C button on your keyboard, which is the shortcut for this button here. So let's go ahead and click that. Now, as I stated previously, once that button has been clicked, some of the adjustment settings will no longer be available. So you can see here at the bottom here, all of our adjustment settings are gone and have now been replaced by these options here. Okay, so now that it's editable, we can use the adjustments tools here on the left side of the screen. And this will allow us to select and modify the sphere in different ways. Now, these are the main tools that we'll be using, and those are the points tool, the edges tool, and the polygons tool. Now, before we continue, the last thing that we need to adjust from our sphere is just deleting this Phong tag here. Now, this Phong tag is what creates the illusion of a smooth surface for our sphere. So if we go back to this mode here, you can see even though our sphere is relatively low poly, it still appears quite smooth. But if we delete this Phong tag like so, suddenly you can see the polygons on the surface of our sphere. We can go ahead and delete this as well. Hi everyone, and welcome back to create a low poly moon with Cinema 4D. So in the last video, we took a look at the different ways that we could adjust the sphere to our liking and created the base model for our moon. Now in this video, we'll take a look at how to create the details of our moon, such as the craters, and look at how we can use the tools to create this. So the first tool that we'll need to take a look at is the points tool, which is located over here. Now this tool, once we select it, allows us to manipulate the different points that make up the sphere. So let's go ahead and click on the move tool here, like so, and making sure that the moon is selected. We can now see that as I move the mouse over the points highlight white, which indicate that we can select them. So let's go ahead and select a point and use the move tool here to move it, like so. Excellent. Now we can also press Ctrl Z on the keyboard to undo an action. We can also select several points and move them all at the same time if we wanted. Now to do this, we'll need to select our first point, like so, and then press the Shift key on the keyboard, and whilst we're holding the Shift key, select the different points, or the points that we want to select on the surface of our moon, like so. And once we've finished our selection, use the Move tool to move it. And you can see now how we can easily create some sort of landscape forms by using this sort of technique, like this. So sort of creating some sort of mountain or a volcano. So let's go ahead and undo these actions by pressing Ctrl Z several times to go back to the way it was before. And now let's move on to the next tool. So the next tool that we will use here is below the Points tool, and it's called the Edges tool. So making sure that our moon is selected, we can choose the Edge Selection tool, and you can see how as I move over the moon, the lines representing the edges sort of highlight white, indicating that we can select these lines. So let's go ahead and select a line and move it like so. And again, we can select multiple lines by holding the Shift key on the keyboard and then using the Move tool to move it like so. Excellent. So let's undo those actions. And finally, we have the Polygon or Face Selection tool, which is over here. Now, this tool allows us to select and manipulate the polygons that make up the moon. Once again, just selecting a polygon and using the Move tool to move it. And again, we can press and hold the Shift key on the keyboard to select multiple polygons or faces. Excellent. So now that we are familiar with these three tools here, the way that we can go back to our original sort of manipulating the object as a whole is by selecting the Model Mode button here. So once we've selected the Model Mode button here, we can then go back to how it was before. So now we can just use the Scale tool and the Move tool as we did previously, just sort of selecting the model as a whole. Great. So we can only use these tools if the model is editable. Now you can find out if the model is editable by taking a look at the button here. Now if it's grayed out, that means it's editable. If it's white, that means you need to click on it to make it editable. So now that we're familiar with the main selection tools that we'll be using, let's go ahead and start modeling the craters for our moon. So we'll create the craters of our moon in two ways to add a little bit of variety to the look of the moon. So the first way that we'll be using that we'll be creating the moon is by using the face selection tool, the polygons. So let's go ahead and select that. And we want to select the area that we want our crater to fill. So let's hold Shift on the keyboard and select this area here. And from there, let's go ahead and right click on this selection and click on Extrude. Now, once the Extrude tool is selected, we can use this to extrude our selection in either a positive direction, like so, or a negative direction into the moon, like so. So for our first crater, we'll just do it in the negative direction for now. So once you're happy with the depth of the crater, just simply let go of the mouse button and change the selection. Now we can also, let's go ahead and do that again. We can also input a number here. So if we wanted to input a number like -10 and hit return on the keyboard, we can make sure that if we wanted all of our craters to be -10 centimeters, we can make sure that it's -10 by using this offset here. Great. Now that we have our first crater, the next step is to create another crater. So let's go ahead and create another selection. So using the selection tool here, let's go ahead and select these triangles here, or these polygons here. And once we've got this selection selected, let's go ahead and press the right key on our mouse, and let's go ahead and click on Extrude Inner. So by using Extrude Inner, we can click and hold on our selection, and we can actually create some more polygons here. And you can see now that this selection is smaller than our original selection. And this is how we can create different sizes of our crater. Now, once you're happy with the smaller size crater here, just simply right click and extrude again. We can go ahead and press -10, like so, making sure that it is the same depth as our previous crater. Excellent. Now, the third and final way that we can create a crater is by clicking on the selection tool here. We're going to select all these triangles like so. Let's go ahead and extrude this selection in the positive. And we can use the scale tool here. Now, just clicking anywhere on the viewport to scale uniformly, like so. Just going to bring it in slightly. And then combining the techniques of both of these craters, let's go ahead and right-click Extrude Inner. And then once you're happy with the size of that, let's go ahead and right-click Extrude and extrude in the negative again to create our third crater. Excellent. So now that we're familiar with these techniques, in the next video we can go ahead and fill up the rest of the moon. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to create a low poly moon with Cinema 4D. In this video, we'll continue adding details and craters around the moon. So just looking at our moon here and the 3 different styles of craters that we've created in the last video, we want to add a bit of variety to our moon to make sure that it doesn't look too repetitive. So I'm just going to take the style of our first crater here and spread it around evenly. So we've got one crater here. Let's go ahead and create one here, like so. So just grabbing the extrude tool and extruding it in the negative direction. And it looks like we can add one here as well. So grabbing my selection tool here, I'm just going to click in the middle of all these polygons, where all these polygons meet, so I don't have to click all the triangles. Right click, select extrude, and again moving it in a negative direction. Cool. And just to add a little bit of variety, let's go ahead and create a larger moon crater here. So selecting all the polygons, extruding it in, and in fact it's quite close to our previous crater, so I don't want to do that. Let's go ahead and select the crater here. Yep, just giving it a little bit of space. Let's extrude this in a positive direction. Just making sure you're happy with the height. And then I'm going to scale it down slightly. Then right click, extrude inner to add some polygons in there. Right click and then extrude in a negative direction, like so. Cool. Right, so let's go ahead and continue doing that. Let's see, where else can we create some cool looking craters? So just moving around the moon here now. Let's go ahead and make a crater here. So selecting that, extrude in the positive direction, scaling it down, extrude inner, and right click, extrude in the negative direction. Cool. Next I'm going to do the same. Let's see, be an interesting place to put the next one. Maybe about here. Just the same thing again, right click, extrude in a positive direction. Maybe this one will be a little bit taller. Or that's a little bit too tall. Let's go ahead. Oh, not moving it. Just being careful where you click with the mouse. Scaling it down. Right click, extrude inner, and just repeating the same steps around the moon like so. Okay, so that's looking quite nice. Let's go ahead and, oh, in fact, it looks like we missed one of the polygons here. So let's go ahead and fix that one. So in order to fix that, just select that one triangle, right click, extrude, and just So let's do this differently. Let's go ahead and delete this polygon, and we can go ahead and delete these polygons here, like so, holding shift to select multiple polygons. Now we've got a space here. What we can do from there is click on the edge selection tool, use our live selection tool here. We're going to select the edge here. So just using the square bracket keys on the keyboard to make our selection smaller or larger. So just want to select that edge there. Zooming in, right click on that. And we want to look for bridge. So just using the bridge tool to bridge this edge to this edge here, like so. So now that we've got that, let's go ahead and fill in this gap here. So using the live selection tool again, select the edge, right click the edge, and now we're going to look for close polygon hole. So using close polygon hole to close that polygon, and there we have fixed our crater. Excellent. So moving back to the polygons tool, selecting the live selection tool again, just going to go ahead and move around our moon, seeing what the best place to select our next crater would be. So we want to spread our craters around so it doesn't look too samey. So let's go ahead and create one, let's say at the top here. Right click, extrude it a little bit, go ahead and scale it down, right click, extrude inner, and then right click, extrude in the negative direction. Cool, and you can see how our moon is slowly starting to take shape. So again, let's go ahead and create some more segments. So going back to the live selection tool here, let's start adding some simpler simpler craters. So let's add a crater here. And we're going to right click, extrude, and let's extrude that in the negative direction like so. Just moving around, seeing whatever places that we can place our crater in. Live selection tool again. We don't want to put a crater here as that's too close to these two craters, but we can add one here. Let's go ahead and right click, extrude, and it could be quite nice. In fact, let's go ahead and see if we can extrude this one in the positive direction as well. Scale it down, right click on the polygons, selected polygons, extrude inner, right click and extrude in the negative direction, like so. Cool, just going around our moon, seeing if there's any other places that we can add another crater. So we've got a space here that we can add a crater to. So going to our live selection tool here, right click. Oh, in fact, it's too close to that crater here, so maybe not there. Moving around again, maybe this one. Right click, extrude, this one in the negative direction. And it looks like we can add one here as well. So I'm just looking for spaces which are quite close to the craters that we've created, but not exactly next to each other. That's too deep, so Control Z, and just making it go in. In fact, we can play about with this one. Let's go ahead and right click, extrude inner, just to make the crater smaller. Right click, extrude, and then in the negative direction, like so. Cool. And I think that about does our moon. We filled up the whole surface of our moon with craters. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll go through how to color our moon using materials. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to create a low poly moon with Cinema 4D. So in the last video, we took a look at a couple of different ways we could model the craters for our moon. In this video, we'll take a look at how we can color our moon using materials. Now, the way that we color models in Cinema 4D is by using materials. To create a new material, click on the Create button at the bottom of the screen here and select New Material. You can also press Ctrl N on the keyboard and it will do the same thing. So let's go ahead and do that. And this will spawn a default material in the bottom of the screen here, which is usually displayed as a gray sphere. So double click on this material here, and now we can start editing the properties of it in the material editor. So this will include a whole range of different options, ranging from color to transparency to reflectance, and also, if you wanted, some light, so some glow, if we selected the glow option here. But for now, the only thing that we're interested in is the color option, which is at the top here. So let's go ahead and select color and untick anything else which is selected by default, such as the reflectance here. And from here, we can now choose the color of our moon. So either double clicking on the color square here, we can go ahead and choose a warm gray color for our moon. And you'll notice now as we select a color, this should also be reflected on the bottom here. So we know exactly what sort of color material we're adding to our objects. So I'm just going to add a light sort of warm gray here. And then once you're happy with the color, all you need to do is close it. And now to add the color to our object, simply click and drag the material onto the moon on our viewport like so. Or we can also click and drag the material into our sphere or our moon in the list view. Now this can be quite handy if there are a lot of objects in the viewport and it's quite difficult to select the objects that you want. So let's go ahead and delete the duplicate material on our sphere. Cool. So we can also color a selection of polygons if we wanted to use different materials for the same object. In order to do this, let's go ahead and create a new material. And with this new material, let's go ahead and make a darker color, like so, removing the reflectance. Now, using a combination of the polygons and the live selection tool, let's go ahead and select our sphere like so, and select these polygons here. And now drag our new material into the selection. Now if we deselect that, you'll notice now that our selection is slightly darker, or it's changed color compared to the rest of our polygons. And this is also reflected in our list view like so. We can go ahead and select all the craters and add this new color to it. But for now, that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll go through how to create different lighting setups. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to create a low poly moon with Cinema 4D. So in the last video, we took a look at how we could add materials to color in our low poly moon model. In this video, we'll take a look at how we can create the lighting setup. So the easiest and most efficient way is to create a physical sky. You can do this under the floor button here. So clicking and hold this floor button and selecting the physical sky. And then once selected, the viewport will change, indicating that you have the physical sky installed. And it will also appear here in our list view. Let's make sure that the physical sky is selected. And we can go through some of the options in our adjustments window. So the first thing that we want to take a look at is under the Sun tab. So making sure that the Sun tab is selected. We can adjust things like the intensity here. So just if we bring the intensity up, you can see in our viewport how the light or the sun is getting brighter. And if we bring the intensity further down, you can see how it starts to get dimmer and darker. So let's bring the intensity back up to 100%, like so. Cool. Now you can also see that the preview color for the light has been set to a default light orange color. Now if we try to change this, you can see how it sort of snaps back to the original color. So in order to create a new color for our light, we need to make sure that custom color here is selected or is ticked. And now the preview color has been grayed out, and we can now select a new color for our light. So for example, if we went and selected a blue cold light here, you can see now how that is reflected in the viewport. Cool. So let's bring the saturation down a little bit, like so. You can play about with the color, or indeed, if you wanted, untick and going back to the original preview color over here. So next we can have a look at the shadows. So just going down here, scrolling down, you can see we've got the shadow area here, and we can change the type of shadows in the drop down menu here. So the standard setting is always set to area. However, if we wanted these shadows to look sharper, we can choose ray traced hard. Now, if we select that, we can see the difference of the shadows by clicking our render preview button here. So let's go ahead and click on that. I can see how now the shadows have a very hard edge to them. So you can see the shadows have quite a hard edge. And if we went back to area and selected our preview button here, you can see the difference, and you can see how the shadows are slightly softer around the moon here. You've got a more softer look. Cool. So now that we can change the type of shadows, we can also change the density here as well. So let's go ahead and bring the density of the shadows down. You can see by doing that, the shadows become a little bit lighter. And if we wanted the shadows to be really dark, we can ramp that right up. And if we click on the preview button here, you can see now the shadows are a lot darker as well. Cool. Now we can also change the color of our shadows here, which will give us interesting results. So double clicking on the color here, we can make the color of our shadow a bright pink color. And we can now see how that looks in the preview. And you can see how that's affected all our shadows. Cool. The next tab that we want to have a look at this time is the time and location tab. Now this is where we can change the direction of the sun. We can click on the arrows here to move forward or backwards in time, and we can see how this affects the lighting for our moon. Now one final tip for the lighting is to use the rotate button here. So making sure that the physical sky is selected, we can click on the rotate button, and by using the rotate tool you can see now how this can also change the direction of the light, like so. Excellent, so that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll take a look at how to use the camera tool. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to create a low poly moon with Cinema 4D. In this video, we'll take a look at how we can use the camera tool. So the first thing that we want to do before introducing the camera into our scene is to rotate and move around the scene until you're happy with the way that it looks. Once you're happy with the way the moon looks on the screen, simply click on the camera tool at the top here to spawn a camera. Now the first thing that you'll want to understand about using the camera is this little square button next to the camera in our list view here. Now notice how that it's colored black at the moment. This means that we can move about the scene as normal, like so, without affecting the camera. So we can move around, zoom in and out, rotate, and so on. Now if we actually zoom out a little bit here, we can actually see the camera in our scene. And we can also see where the camera is looking at, indicated by these lines here as well. So you can see how this is actually what we're looking at in the camera lens. Now using this option, we can actually move the camera as you would a normal object. So we can actually use the move tool here to move the camera around like so. And we can also use the rotate tool to move the camera around as well, like so. Just go ahead and Control Z to undo that. Now if we go back to this black square here and click on it, notice how that we've actually zoomed into the camera, and also this black square turns white. This means that we're actually seeing into the viewport as if through the lens of the camera. Now when in this mode, anything that we do here directly affects the view for the camera. So if we pan across here or rotate, you'll see that this is actually rotating the camera. Now this might be useful if we wanted to treat the camera tool more like an actual camera. So you can actually look at exactly what the camera is looking at and what adjustments you're making in real time. Always make sure to note what mode you're in by looking at this square button here. One of the things that you don't want to do is you don't want to navigate around the viewport just to find out that you're in camera mode and lose your composition. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll take a look at how we can render our moon. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to create a low poly moon with Cinema 4D. In this video, we'll take a look at how we can render our low poly moon. So the first thing we need to familiarize ourselves with is the render settings here. So let's go ahead and click on the render settings button. And this will bring up the render settings menu. So the first thing we want to have a look at is the output. And here we can sort of change the width or the height or the resolution of our image here. So this one we're just going to keep at these settings here, or if we wanted we can go ahead and change this to 1920 by 1080, just leaving the resolution at 72. Cool. The next option that you will want to have a look at is the save option here. Now here we can have a look at the place and where we're going to save our file. So you can click on this button here to choose where you're going to save it. The format we're going to choose is PNG. And we want to make sure that the alpha channel is selected as well. So this means that we can keep the transparency of the image behind the moon. So we can sort of take this into Photoshop and create a background for it, for example. Cool. Now, to ensure that the render is nice and sharp, let's go to this section here. And we want to make sure that filter is set to cubic still image, which can be found under filter. Next, we may want to add some ambient occlusion and global illumination. And usually these sections here can be found under the effect menu. So if I go ahead and remove these and click on effect, you can now add ambient occlusion and global illumination like so. So that's it for the render settings. All we need to do now is to close that window and select Render to Picture Viewer to render our image. For some computers, this might take a while, so sit tight and relax whilst this goes on, or grab a cup of tea whilst you wait. After a few minutes, check back to see if it's done. So that's it for this lesson. In the next lesson, we'll go over how we can take our render into Photoshop. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to create a low poly moon with Cinema 4D. In this video, we'll take a look at how we can create a low poly moon illustration in Photoshop. Next, we want to create a background for our illustration. Now to do this, let's create a new layer by clicking on the button here. Click and drag it underneath our moon layer because it's going to go behind the moon. And we're going to color it by right-clicking on the layer, go to Blending Options, go to Gradient Overlay, so make sure that's ticked. And we're going to choose the colors from the gradient here. So double-click here, or click on it here. And usually you'll have the presets options here, so we can just select the black to white preset, and we can click on these buttons here, double clicking on that to choose a color. So the first color that I'm going to choose is going to be a light purple color, so 96 and 64 and 131, and I'm going to double click on the white here, and I'm going to choose a darker purple color. So 25, 14, and 54. Now it's quite nice to have the gradient go from a light color to a dark color. And of course you can choose any color, but I've chosen to choose purple. Once you're happy with your color selection, click OK. click OK again, and then just use the fill tool here. Make sure that your new layer is selected and fill it. Excellent. So now that we've got our layer here, we can just rename this background. And the next thing that we want to do, in fact, let's go ahead and go back into blending options. Click on gradient overlay again. And we can actually set the angle of our gradient. So you can see here that we've got the light coming in from the top right hand side. So I want to do the same. So just angle the gradient so that the light color is coming in from the top right hand side as well. Just going to click OK to confirm that. Right, now that we've got our background color and now that we've got our sky set up, the next step is to create a field of stars for our background. To do this, we'll want to start with another new layer. Make sure that's on top of the background. Double click that and rename this stars. And this time we're going to want to fill this with black. So double click over here and make sure that we've chosen a true black. So go all the way down to the bottom here. We'll type in 6 zeros here. Click OK. And now we're going to just fill this new layer with black. Excellent. Now that we've got that, the next thing we want to do is we want to go to Filter, Noise, and Add Noise. Now from here, we want the settings to be 50. Make sure that Gaussian is selected and make sure that monochromatic is selected as well. Click OK for that. Then go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And here we want our radius to be 1.5. Click OK for that. Excellent. Now to finish our stars, we want to go to Image, Adjustments, and Levels. And over here, we want to use these sliders here from the left and to the right to sort of bring them into the middle close together. And as you can see by doing this, you'll notice how our black layer here is starting to resemble a field of stars. So you can experiment with the sliders here to sort of find a composition that you like best. So we can move the middle here like so. So we can have more stars here, or if you wanted less stars, we can come over here and then just sort of play about with the sliders like so. And then once you're happy with that, click OK. Now what we have to do from here is make sure the stars layer is selected and choose Screen from the drop-down menu here. And if we want to add more details to the stars and to add a little bit of twinkle to them, we'll need to duplicate this layer and go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur. And let's have the distance at around 5. So the more distance you have, the bigger the twinkle is going to be. And the less distance you have, the smaller the twinkle is going to be. So if you see, if I move it to 10, the twinkle is going to be slightly larger. In fact, if I go to 40, you'll probably be able to see a lot better. You can see the line is a lot longer. So let's put it at 10 for now. And then click OK. And then let's bring the opacity down to about 50%. Then we're going to go back to our original stars layer. Right click and duplicate that layer as well. And this time we'll go to Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, and we'll set the angle to 90 degrees. So now we've got a horizontal and a vertical line. And we can also set this opacity to 50. Excellent. So to keep things neat and tidy, we can now select all three of these layers by holding Shift on the keyboard and selecting the bottom and the top layer here, like so, and just click on the group button. And now we can double click the group and rename this stars. Excellent. Now that we've got our star set up and we've got our sky set up, we'll want to add some finishing touches to the moon itself. So let's go ahead and select the shape of the moon by holding Control on the keyboard and then clicking on the moon layer. Click on a new layer here and let's name this shadow. And from there, we're going to select a brush and we want to select a soft brush. So let's go to our brush presets and we want to choose a basic brush. Make sure that you've got a basic brush here. And we want the brush to be soft. So make sure that you've got a soft brush selected. So right click on the canvas and you can choose the hardness of the brush. So the hardness is at 0%. You can choose the size of the brush as well. So I'm going to make sure that the size of the brush is fairly large so that it can cover the majority of the moon. So about 900 pixels. Make sure that you've got black selected. And in the shadow layer, we're just going to dab the shadows down here just to accentuate the shadow. And then we can put the layer to multiply and an opacity at about, let's say, 40%. And then we want to do the same thing again. So create a new layer, rename that layer light. And this time we're going to switch and choose white. And we're going to do the same thing again, but this time on the light part of the moon, like so. And then from here, we're going to choose screen and bring the opacity down like so to about 40%. Excellent. Now, as some final touches, we're going to add some adjustment layers on top of everything. So let's go ahead and deselect our selection. Go to this button here. And the first thing that we're going to set up is a photo filter. So the photo filter here, we want to set this as a warming filter of 81 and the density at about 25. And then the next layer here, so click on the layer button here, and we're going to choose curves. So once we've chosen curves, it'll bring up the properties here, and we want to bring the bottom down a bit and the top up a bit. And then in the drop down menu here, let's go to blue and we want to bring the blue up slightly, like so. Excellent. And now the final layer is going to be brightness and contrast. So we can bring the brightness up slightly and we'll want to bring the contrast up slightly as well. So you can experiment with these values to see what suits best. So that's it for this video. In the next lesson, we'll go through how to add some final touches to our low poly moon illustration. See you all there. Hi everyone, and welcome back to create a low poly moon with Cinema 4D. In this lesson, we'll add the final touches to our low poly moon illustration. Okay, let's go ahead and finish this illustration off. So I'm going to highlight all three layers here. And let's go ahead and make this a little bit smaller, just to give the illustration a little bit more space around the frame. So let's go ahead and put it down to about, let's say, 85%. And we're going to add a little bit more contrast to this moon. So I'm going to duplicate this layer, and I'm going to set that layer to screen. And let's go ahead and move the opacity down slightly to about 50%. And I want to go ahead and go to adjustments, and let's go to hue saturation and bring the lightness up a bit. So I'm going to bring the lightness up to about 35% and bring the opacity back down slightly, like so. Excellent. Next, we're going to add a layer below the moon layer, just below the moon layer, and let's call this background glow. And we're going to choose a nice purple color here. So I've chosen this particular color. And we're going to take the brush and make sure that the hardness is set to 0%. So nice, round, soft brush. And we're just going to put it anywhere in the screen, like so. And if I use the move tool, you'll see that we've got this sort of glow here that we can add behind our moon. So I'm just going to press Ctrl T to transform. I'm going to make it quite big so that we can see it just behind our moon here, like so. Apply the transformation and maybe just make it slightly smaller. Let's make it smaller by 85%. And I'm going to bring the opacity of this down slightly as well to about 80% too. Excellent. Now the next thing we're going to do here is we're going to add a slight light glow to the top right of our moon. So let's go ahead and select a nice white, a bright white, and do the same thing again, just to create a layer just above our light layer here, like so. Let's call this light glow. Just click anywhere on the screen, and we're going to press Ctrl T to manipulate it. So let's make it thinner, turn it around, just sort of making it go around the general shape of our moon, or the general sort of roundness of our moon here, like so. And once we are happy with the positioning, click apply. We're going to set this layer to screen, and we're going to set the opacity down to about 35. Now this section here is a little bit too dark, I find, so let's go ahead and make that bit lighter. So I'm going to duplicate our moon copy layer, which is the screen layer, and let's go ahead and use our soft eraser and erase the bits that are too bright. It's going to lighten the moon slightly on the bottom part where the shadow is, and we can make the shadow, adjust the shadow slightly as well. Cool. Now we can also go ahead and adjust the background light. So let's go ahead and create another layer, call it background light, and again just choosing the soft round brush, I'm going to dab it on anywhere. I'm just going to move it to the top right hand corner of the screen, make it fairly big. And then apply the transformation. And again, just lowering the opacity down. And it sort of makes it look like there's a lot of light, a lot of glow coming from the top right of our screen. Now the next thing that I want to do from here is to duplicate the stars group. So let's duplicate the stars group, and we can add more stars to our illustration by applying a transformation. And let's go ahead and right click on the transformation, flip horizontal, and now you can sort of just move the stars anywhere on the screen. And I'm going to right click and merge this group, and then I'm going to create a screen layer again. I just want to go ahead and create more stars on the screen like so. Just fill up our illustration. So duplicating that layer, that screen layer, and moving the stars around just to populate our illustration like so. And then once you're happy with that, just merging these layers and then just setting that to screen again. And we can go ahead and blur these stars again. Just blur these stars slightly. And I'm just going to set that to 75. So I'm just going to apply a transformation and make these stars slightly smaller. And you can go ahead and duplicate this layer again and just keep populating our illustration like so. And then once you're happy with the stars, what we're going to do from here is we're going to highlight all of our layers like so, including the lighting layers. And we're going to right click. We're going to duplicate all the layers. And then with all these layers still highlighted, let's go ahead and right click and merge these layers like so. So now we've got the illustration on our topmost layer. Okay, now that we've got our new top layer here, what we want to do from there is go to Filter, Noise, and Add Noise. And we're going to add some noise. We're going to put the amount down a lot more. So let's play about with uniform and just play about with the slider here. And we just want to add a little bit of noise to merge the whole illustration together. So something like 2%, or let's go ahead with 3%, or something in the middle, 2.5. And yeah, that looks about right. So click OK. And there we have it, our full low poly moon illustration. And with that, we've come to the conclusion of the low poly moon course. In the next lesson, we'll have a brief overview of what we've learned throughout the course and how we can use these skills and techniques to create other illustrations. See you all there. So with that, we've come to the end of the Create a Low Poly Moon in Cinema 4D course. So now that you know the basics of how to create and adjust shapes to create a moon, you can experiment by creating similar types of models, such as creating other planets. The great thing about constructing models in 3D is that you can easily come back to the model to make some adjustments and edit the shapes later on. I hope you've learned a lot from these demos and that you can apply these skills to your own workflows. I hope that you've learned some new things in 3D that you haven't been able to use before and that you can use them to create your own future illustrations and designs. I had a lot of fun creating this course, so thanks for watching, good luck creating your own 3D low poly moons and planets, and I'll see you next time on Tut Plus.